Welcome to today's Power Hour. We haven't had one for a couple of months with FutureWorks and Easter being in the way. Great to see a lot of you at FutureWorks at Peterborough end of March, and we had some fantastic feedback from it. So I think we're going to be incorporating some of the future tech elements of FutureWorks into PlantWorks next year. Today's speakers, some of you may have seen at FutureWorks, but they're going to be going into some more detail from National Highways on the connected autonomous plant. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joanna Oliver, Director of Global Programmes for the Construction Equipment Association. Not as global as I used to be, thanks to COVID and a singular lack of funding from government, but hope to be on the road again before too long, and BAMR at the latest. Quick run through the rules of the CEA House. The webinar is held in accordance with the CEA corporate compliance rules, which you can find on our website. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our website with the speaker's slides as soon as we can get that downloaded. Please, some of you don't have as much bandwidth as others, so stay on mute unless you are asking a question. If you do want to ask a question, if you can put that in the Zoom chat box, and then we'll either read it out or call on you to ask it yourself. Please turn off your video. Not that we don't want to look at you, but it means you can get on with having your lunch in peace and listening to our excellent two speakers this afternoon. And we're doing our best technologically, and it's threatening to have a thunderstorm around here. So if we suddenly go crash, we'll do our best to get over it. So today's speakers are more on the technical side of the CEA work. So I'm going to pass over now to Dale Campsall, the CEA's Senior Technical Consultant. What Dale doesn't know about regulatory and technical affairs absolutely isn't worth knowing. So over to you, Dale.
Thank you very much indeed, Joanna. Yeah, welcome folks to this afternoon's session. As Joanna said, the first in a little while, and we're going to be covering connected and autonomous plant this afternoon. Personal observation is that I would say that CAP, connected and autonomous plant, along with decarbonisation, are probably the two areas where we see the most innovation currently ongoing. A lot of market demands in this field. Market demands as well, which is interesting, rather than regulatory led matters. Yeah, a very interesting and very exciting time to be looking at matters related to connected and autonomous plant. And therefore it's with great pleasure welcome to do today's speakers from National Highways, who have been very much at the forefront in developing CAP technologies and at the application of CAP technologies. So we have Muneer Akhtar, who's the Innovation Supply Chain Manager. CEA and Muneer have an established relationship. Muneer is good friends to the CEA, and we've liaised many times in the past. And he's supported today by his colleague Amir Essa, who's the Innovation Senior Advisor. These two guys are absolute experts in their field. Their enthusiasm is second to none, and I'm sure you'll get a flavour of that enthusiasm during the next 45 minutes or so. So, without any further ado, I will pass over to Muneer, who's going to lead off the presentation on the National Highways aspect of CAP.
Thanks, Dale. Can everybody see the slides?
Yeah, I can see them.
Good. Yeah. Right, I'll be quiet.
Thank you very much for that good introduction, and thank you for inviting us for today's presentation. General format for today is going to be that myself and Ami are going to give a presentation for about 40 minutes, roughly, give and take. It may go on a bit long if we get some questions. Dale, I'm not sure if we answer during the presentation or at the end, but I'll just wait for instructions.
Whichever way you want to take it, Muneer. It's probably easier to do it at the end, or maybe if you wanted to take some at the end of your part, entirely up to you.
We'll just play it by ear then. I am going to switch off my camera so I can preserve some bandwidth, and you don't want to be seeing me. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, as I previously said, the format for the day is just give you a bit of introduction about National Highways. Some of you may know who we are. So I'll just sort of recap on it and then talk into the first phase of Connected Autonomous Plant. And then I will hand over to Amir, who will talk over the phase 2 and also give you a bit of insight into the phase 3. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Just a bit of a background of who National Highways are. We maintain and manage the strategic road network, and that consists of roughly around 4,300 miles of network. It's a lot in all fairness, and we do maintain a lot of assets within that, and that includes 150,000 signs, 20,000 bridges, 100,000 street lights, and we do try to maintain it to the highest possible standard. So our daily task is not just the maintainer, it's also a builder as well. So we have quite a large task that we need to do. And in all fairness, I've got to say I'm quite proud to work for National Highways because the levels and the standards that we work towards are really, really high. Next slide, please. A bit about the background for National Highways. I've been here for a good few years, way before 2015. But at 2015, it was a bit of a pinnacle point for us where we became a government company, a government-owned company. And from there on, we sort of have progressed quite well. There's been a lot of changes internally, positive changes. And some of the things that we do is now we always have to, in all fairness, but since the traffic officers came in, we maintain the network 365 days a year. We work 24 hours. There's no stopping for us. We relentlessly work to ensure that everybody is safe on our network and clear up incidents that happen on the network. And we have good working relationships with the Department for Transport, which is our, in effect, could be our parent department where we get a lot of our funding from. What we also try and do is make sure that we maximize the benefit for our taxpayers, and everything that we do does need to have value for money to ensure that we can give some benefit to the taxpayer. Next slide, please. This is a bit more statistics, really interesting statistics in all fairness. I always find it in any case, is that, we help the traveling public travel roughly in the region of about 95 billion miles a year on that SRN. We carry more passengers than the rail network. And we also carry 68% of freight, which is a good number in all fairness, considering that we are some might consider us to be quite small in our network, but we carry a lot of commercial vehicles. Next slide, please. Some of our sort of 3 imperatives that we have as a business. The first one is safety. Everything that we do has to be safe, and that intertwines quite neatly with the customer and the delivery element of it. So they're all sort of joined together, but whatever we do, safety is our number 1 priority. Next slide, please. We work in risk periods. We work in 5-year periods. And the current period we're in is what we call road investment period 2. So that means that is between 2020 and 2025. And between this period, we've been allocated in the region of £27.4 billion to maintain and build the network. And this is just some of where the money is allocated. And it's spread quite evenly, I think, but a lot of it does go to operations, and to enhancement schemes as well. One thing might be worth mentioning is that when we did start the CAP journey, the funding that we got to deliver this project came from the designated funds, and that was from the research innovation pot. I won't talk much about that, but it was quite challenging to get funds. I mean, although I'm internal, I still have to go through a number of hoops. I don't get any special treatment. Nobody in the business gets any special treatment. We all have to go through the same process. Next slide, please. And that sort of brings me over to our slide on connected autonomous plant. There's no questions about national highways, so I'm presuming you're all quite comfortable with what I've said. Connected and autonomous plant really started for me about 6-7 years ago. It started as a novel project called the Intelligent Excavation, where I was on site and I had this idea of why don't we have all of these plants connected, and then started off with a novel project, got a bit of funding internally, contacted a number of suppliers, some of the large OEMs, some of the academics, built a really good community together, and we started to develop the actual roadmap in itself. I wouldn't say the roadmap, but the intelligent excavation part. What I did do is start on probably one of the most difficult pieces of kit, which was the excavator 360, to try and automate it. We hit all of our targets, and then from there on, it quite quickly moved on to connected autonomous plant. So that's how it was really formed, and the journey really started in about 2018, 2019, where we started to work on a roadmap. Can we go on to the next slide, please? I mean, some of the things that we try to aim is to with CAP is to try and modernize construction. And for those of you quite familiar with construction, probably found that, well, I certainly found that it was a bit fragmented. So what I was trying to do is bring a lot of the industry together, to take a bit of leadership, and try and get us to work together to get some automation, very much similar to what was on our other sectors in the industry, such as the manufacturing sector. So what we see on the left-hand side is one of our sites that was built in the 1970s. I don't think construction has really changed much since then, but that on the left-hand side at the bottom is the A14, where we've used a lot of construction techniques, modernized construction techniques to build structures. And in fact, we did on there the first automated autonomous dump truck trial. But ultimately, from a productivity gain, the objective was to really ensure that construction moves up to a level where manufacturing is at the current state. I personally think we've got a long way there. I think we can mirror, if not be better than the manufacturing sector, but we need to just work together as an industry and try and get to that level. Next slide, please. This is the vision that I have. Is that what I'm trying to do is get the logistics company working with the excavator, working with the operative on site, and then getting a lot of the monitoring done, whether it's by GPS or by drones. Maybe something in the future may come out, I don't know, but it's not included on here at the moment. But I think the key thing to take away is that this is just a start of the journey. We've got a long way to go, as you'll see as we go through the roadmap. And National Highways hasn't done this alone. It's really taken up a leading position and gone to the Infrastructure Industry Innovation Partnership, which some of you may or may not be aware of, but it's where clients sit together and discuss sort of innovations that are happening. And so we presented this idea to them, and they were very eager and supportive of the idea. And that's why we've got other clients joining us on this journey, and those include Environment Agency, HS2, and in fact through my journey, it was really interesting and pleasing to hear other clients such as that within the nuclear sector wanting to join us and really understand what this was all about. Next slide, please. What this means for national highways specifically is that where this fits in is it neatly sort of aligns with our digital roads vision, in that what we need to do is ensure that we don't just start thinking about construction, which some might see as the end phase, but I'm trying to get our supply chain to start thinking about the design elements. So when the designer is sitting in the office and sending over the drawings, they can actually start to send them over to the plant in a connected manner. The plant can start interpreting what that really means, and then it can start to construct, and then we can start to maintain it because we know what we've put in. And when it comes to decommissioning, we know where everything is. So it's a full life cycle, cradle to grave process. Some of the benefits that it brings to us includes productivity gains, and we did a quick study on this, and we established that between now and 2040, if we started to adopt more automation on site, that we could bring in the region of about £200 billion worth of productivity gains. That's quite a sizable chunk of money to save in productivity gains. But one of the most pressing things, I suppose, from my perspective, is that it will bring lots of environmental savings and also bring safety benefits as well, in that we'll have a reduction of incidents on site, whether it's a trip, slip or fall, whether it's plant-to-plant interface or some of the halves. It could be any health and safety element. We could be eliminating that going forward. And from an environmental perspective, because we're working at an optimum level, we should see a reduction in harmful emissions. And of course, another project that I'm working on at the moment, which I'm going to sidetrack for a few seconds, is that I'm looking at alternative fuel sources and hoping to trial that within the connected and autonomous space as well. So not only will we be getting enhanced operations on site, but we'll also be getting them environmentally friendly as well. The long-term vision is that we're taking it in step approaches and trying to break it into the short, medium, and long term. The short is between now and 2025. The medium is about until 2030, and the long term is to 2040, where we should start to see more semi-automation and full automation on our sites. Next slide, please. What we did develop is what you see here is the first of a kind roadmap for construction automation. This was developed in collaboration with over 100 industry stakeholders. This included academics, it included the OEMs. Some of you may be on the call, some of them not. And we've also engaged with SMEs as well. What was really interesting about this collaboration is that we had a lot of interaction with our colleagues across the borders in Europe, and that included other road administrators who were quite positive about it. And we've presented this to a lot of road administrators further afield as well. So it was really interesting getting a lot of these stakeholders involved. And what we did manage to do is get a lot of you to sit together and really help us deliver this. Because one thing we've got to recall and remember is that this is something that National Highways is leading on, and it's doing it for the industry, and it's to eliminate that element where individual organizations are trying to develop something and the rival people like ourselves, such as National Highways, may not really understand it. So what we've done is sort of brought everybody together and say, this is what we have identified, which is 3 leading areas. And within that, we've identified a number of work streams within it. Now, this will take a number of years. At the bottom, we've got the timeline, and that's where we're hoping where we can start to get some of this automation on site. One thing to really take away from this roadmap is it's a live roadmap. Just because we've got an item that's listed as 2035 or at 2020, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to have to do it at that time. It simply means that that's when we're envisaging it should happen. If the technology providers come along and say to us, well, actually, we can do it before then, this roadmap will change, and it will really start to sort of come to life. So we can change the dates quite easily onto that roadmap. We're not due for another edition for another few years, but again, that's just only an estimate. If for any reason a supplier comes back to us, as I said, and says, I think we can do it quicker, we should definitely go and revise it and give you a firm date of what we think, or a firm date of when it should be done. Next slide, please. This is just highlighting the three work streams, the three major work streams. What we did was look at the current state and put it into three categories. And then some of you, through your specialists, may sort of be pushing towards one of the headers, which is absolutely fine. Some of you may be doing two, or maybe doing all three, which is absolutely fine. But what we have done is taken the current state, put it into one of the work streams or the main headers, done the swimming lanes, and developed a roadmap that will take us into the future. Next slide, please. This just gives a bit more information around some of the headers, just giving a bit more information. One of the things that we have done is looked at the people and society element of it. And what we have done is, and I won't go into too much detail at the moment because Emma will talk about it, but through phase 3, we're going to start looking at the regulations and the legislation part of it. One of the work streams that we have done is started to look at the cap maturity matrix, which will help us to really identify where our supply chain is on their journey to automation. Next slide, please. This literally is a snapshot of what technology holds out there, where we are at the moment in 2020 and where we'll potentially be in 2035, 2040. The comments within the center of the slide are really what our supply chain have told us what they think CAP will bring for the future, and a lot of them will have literally said a lot of the things that I've already mentioned in the presentation, that it will bring a lot of efficiency, safety, and also bring some connectivity to our sites. Connectivity, I think, is something that we should definitely look at, whether that's 3G, 4G, 5G. I always say 7G because it's a 7-star hotel. If we're going to have so much connectivity on site, we need it constantly uninterrupted. So when a machine is operating or a piece of plant is operating, it's not going to stop because it's lost a connection. From a safety perspective, it will stop in its current track. What we want to do is have that full connectivity every single time, so it just continues with its activity. On the left-hand side is just some of the headsets that are available, and on the right is one of our OEMs which has interacted with us and told us what they're producing. And this is really a call out or a shout out to any other OEM as well, that if you are developing something, do please get in contact with us, because what we do need to do is build those relationships, build those and form those bonds with yourselves, so we can start challenging our supply chain, whether it's our tier 1, tier 2s, and say, well, as an OEM, they've developed this piece of kit. Why are we, as a client, not seeing it more on our sites? Next slide, please. As part of CAP phase 1, when we developed the roadmap, we also developed a set of commitment statements. Now, it's really important to remember that we develop these in collaboration with the supply chain for the supply chain. So this is what they've told us, what they want, and we've implemented it and put it into a document. And I'll just list on the next slide some of the stuff that they've told us that they want. So one of the things that what the supply chain have told us is that they need to start making more reference to CAP within the statements and within our contracts. That's something that we're looking to at the moment. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're really, really working towards it, and we're actively working towards it. And again, it's a bit of a shout out to say, if there is anything that you want us to do or can help us, or where you see where there's improvements, then do come in contact with us and we can start working. I think we're quite unique in the position that we're in at the moment. Where we sit is within National Highways is the Safety Engineering Standards Directorate, and that's where a lot of the standards sit. So we can encourage the rest of the business to start adopting this. So we don't sit in major projects or operations. We sit in a different directorate and support the business in developing some of these policies and some rules. So we're in the right place to drive this agenda. Next slide, please. I think one of the biggest things for us, again, well, these three or the top two are definitely one of the two that we definitely need to approach, is around all the procurement rules. I think in many of our contracts there is some push to have innovation, but what we're doing in SCS within National Highways is try to see more of it on our sites. Next slide, please. How did we do it? These are just some of the suppliers that have helped us on our journey for phase one. There's many more that have provided us and support us in phase two. But what I've really done is set the direction of travel. What we've done is also communicated with what we call the Transport Research Innovation Board, and that's government-led, and that's where a lot of the clients, government departments sit together. And we did recently give a presentation to them, and they were very welcoming of it. And that was the Chief Scientific Advisor. So we do have a lot of exciting times ahead of us. There is a lot of interest from government departments, but what we do need to do is just keep the foot on the gas, and we cannot just simply do it alone. We need you on our side. And the approach I've always taken is that it's not something that I want to take, it's something that we want to take together and push forward. And when we did launch the roadmap in June 2020, it was done on a virtual event, and we had over 160, 170 delegates attend from senior levels. And that wasn't just within the UK, it was from the Americas, and it was as far away as the Middle East, and even further than that. So the message is slowly getting out there, but it's just for yourselves as a business to really click on to the link that you'll get later on in the actual presentation, find out more about it, and reach out to us and see how we can help one another. Next slide, please. There's not many questions that have been posted. I'm working off a phone, so nothing's popped up. But what I am going to do now is hand over to Amir, who's now going to talk about phase two, where we've developed the next phase in terms of the maturity matrix.
Thank you, Muneer. Thank you for the introduction. So my name's Amir. I'm an innovation advisor at National Highways, and as Muneer's mentioned, I'll be taking forward the next phases of CAP, building on the great progress that he's made, but also working with industry to try and get the CAP vision realised by 2035, if not earlier. So if we take a second just to kind of reflect on where we've come from and where we're heading to, we can understand that from the 1900s, the technology has advanced to some extent. Our ways of working have advanced as well to some extent, probably less so, but we're still not at the stage we want to see us at yet. 2050 seems like a fair amount away, just under 30 years away, but we've got a lot of work to do until then to realise our ambition. And like Muneer said, previous phase was largely focused on collaboration amongst industry, and we don't see any reason for that to stop going forward with CAP 3 onwards. But before we get there, I just want to talk more about what we achieved in CAP 2, which some of you are already familiar with. So next slide, please. So CAP 1 was all about the development and launch of the roadmap and the vision. CAP phase 2 is essentially building on one aspect of that roadmap, quite a big aspect, which was the development of some what we're calling capability levels. And essentially, they are similar but different to the SAE levels for CAVs, Society of Automotive Engineering for Connected Autonomous Vehicles. And they're different because the context around CAP within construction is different. However, we do see these levels being a first iteration of potentially many, and they're focused around 5 main aspects that we've tried to kind of specify construction tasks, kind of underpinning a construction task, but based on human values. So if we think about the way that a human works, we observe, we understand, we decide, and we act. There is a 5th element, which is a fallback element, called responsibility. And together these form the UDAR levels. And what we've tried to do is understand how can we make a machine not replicate, but understand a construction task in terms of human activity. So then we can design for machines and not necessarily design for human behavior if our end goal is to remove the operative from site, therefore increasing safety or improving safety. So the first level, O, observe, that's related to how automated a system is with regards to acquiring data from its environment. The U element is understand, and that's associated with how automated a system is at processing data to determine its environment based on the observations. So one step leads to another. After it's understood its environment, we then go to the decision phase. So D for decide is related to how automated a system is at deciding what action could be taken based off of the understood environment. The final part, or the penultimate part, should I say, is acting. So this is a gauge to understand how automated a system is at carrying out an action based on the decision. So one level leads to another. And within these levels, we've got different variations of automation. So observe, we've got between 0 and 2, understand between 0 and 3, depending if it's not automated, partially automated, or fully automated. The 5th aspect is responsibility. There is this interface between human and plant for semi-autonomy, and we realize that. So the responsibility aspect is all to do with understanding who or what is ultimately responsible for the continued safe operation of a machine. So if there's a human intervention needed or operative needs to intervene for the machine to continue with its task as a level of supervision, then we've got the responsibility aspect as well. So these are the 5 UDAR levels. The first iteration may need to be developed or refined in due course once we start to apply them in anger. But that's an overview as to the levels which we've developed as part of phase 2, and we launched them at FutureWorks earlier this year. Next slide, please. So we launched the roadmap in June 2020, 2 years ago, and we launched the levels at FutureWorks earlier this year, a couple of months ago at FutureWorks. We had a presence there for the 2 days. The first day on the Wednesday was with regards to a more kind of senior audience amongst the industry and a more kind of intimate affair with regards to explaining the levels, understanding the levels, understanding what that looks like in practicality terms. And then the second day of attendance was more a wider reaching audience with industry, and also engagement amongst attendees. We had a series of CAP keynotes and also technical tours and demonstrations of the technology. And we've had really, really good engagement with the media coverage and really good feedback, very positive feedback from attendees across both days. There was other partnerships there as well. HS2, the Supply Chain Sustainability School, were there as well. And this is all brought together by the CEA. And we do thank you, Joanna and the team, for allowing us to participate amongst that effort. And we do hope to attend in the upcoming events next year. But details are yet to be confirmed. So we've launched the levels. We understand what the levels are, but why do we develop them? Next slide, please. So there's benefits associated with both sides of the coin here of industry. So for us, it allows us to specify and track the implementation of CAP. And ultimately, that may allow us to mandate the technology use. But we understand we first might need to specify that within the contracts for our schemes. The other side of the coin is that for the OEMs, it can act as a catalyst for innovation within their respective fields in the machinery technology. We know that there's constant research being undertaken and refinement to the machinery and technologies involved, and there is competition amongst the OEMs. So it allows the OEMs to benchmark against each other. Also, if they're familiar or understanding that this is what we almost expect to see in future, the OEMs can then set themselves capability targets with regards to CAP. And all of this, both sides of the coin, are all designed to create or foster an environment where the supply chain, OEMs, SMEs feel a bit more inclined to invest in technology and build their confidence, because we do understand that it's very risky investing in innovation, and we as a client organization, we have a part to play in fostering that environment. Next slide, please. So whilst we haven't applied these levels in anger, we have tried to some extent, explain how this looks like for machinery on site. We've taken some construction plant from different manufacturers associated with compaction to try and give a very brief overview, brief example as to what this looks like. So CAT command for compaction, the machine on the left-hand side, you could argue that that's semi-autonomous to an extent. And the machine on the right-hand side, the RoboMag machine, that's fully autonomous. So that's where it's got autonomy built into the design, as opposed to potentially on the left-hand side, retrofitting the machine with sensors. Now, you can see from the first three levels, the OUD, observe, understand, decide, those levels are exactly the same. However, the main difference is how the machine acts and the responsibility associated with that. So on the left-hand side, the semi-autonomous vehicle, it requires human intervention before it goes on to the next step. Therefore, the responsibility level falls half on the machine, half on the operative, in terms of maintaining the safety of the operation involved. On the right-hand side, and because the RoboMag machine is fully autonomous, it can act on its own behalf, and therefore the responsibility is entirely associated with the machine itself. So these are just two examples of how these levels might be applied. There may be some refinement there needed in future, but we are understanding that if the SAE levels go through a process of iteration, why would we not do the same for ours if it makes it more accurate, more precise, and also more in line with the development of the technology as the years progress and as we get closer to realizing that ambition for a fully connected and autonomous site. Next slide, please. So, we look to the future, we need to understand where we've come from. We've developed the roadmap, we've developed the levels and launched both. The next phases will be associated with, or largely associated with, the standardization of these levels and the application. So there may be an element of certification involved that's yet to be decided, yet to be confirmed. Collaboration amongst all stakeholders involved, so we don't expect that collaboration to stop, as I've previously said. And that ultimately allows us in National Highways to be in a standing where we can expect to see this on site, because we know the capabilities there, we know our targets, we know that we need to build more, potentially with less resource, if not the same level of resource. Then why shouldn't we then be in a position where we can expect to see it on site? From my perspective, we should be able to be in that position. So if we go to the next slide, please. What does this mean in terms of future activity? So we first need to understand how these levels are going to be internally used, internally kind of viewed, engaged, and hopefully approved or accepted. We've also got work associated with an ISO and a PAS standard. We already understand that the DFT through the TRIB is working on a PAS standard. And Ross Walker on the call today, he's also part of ISO work associated with this. So there's a lot of overlap between the standardization piece, and we just need to make sure that we've got the right people in the right places to make sure that we work in fully collaboratively. After that will then come a level of certification we expect. Now, collaboration has been key throughout the previous phases, and it will be in the future. We're collaborating at the moment with the I3P, the TRIB, the Transport Research and Innovation Board, and hopefully the CAP community, which we're yet to kind of set up in anger and also have a an actual official workshop, which we're working on in the background as we speak. Ultimately, in the future, we want to be able to track sites. So with regards to metrics related to carbon, productivity, efficiencies, and the like, we want to be able to understand how our sites are performing so that we can then form a baseline against our KPIs and how we are achieving them. If we're not, what do we need to do differently, do better? And as I said before, we are going to be expecting the levels to be used in anger. So next slide, please. If we look to future activity and CAP 3, what does that entail? So in the immediate future, early this month, we've presented to the Construction in the 21st Century conference. So we're not just looking at national usage of the levels, we're also trying to highlight this or make awareness of these levels on an international level. So CITC is one of these efforts. Another effort in July is presented to the conference on International Symposium on Automation and Robotics in Construction. So there's two strands there where we're trying to take it on an international level, or at least raise awareness. We're also looking to develop and publish articles in the New Civil Engineer and other aspects of ICE, as well as CIHT, etc. And as I mentioned before, the CAP community workshop, which we're working on in the background. So for the next phase of CAP 3, this is yet to be confirmed, so we haven't secured any funding for these aspects as of yet. Paperwork is being developed on this. But we look to have 3 main strands for CAP Phase 3. Design for machines, and that includes work related to rapid engineering modeling, and that's with the major projects team under Lorraine Butler. So integrating with her team and making sure that we can go from a rapid engineering model straight to the machines. As Muneer mentioned earlier, we're also looking to conduct a legislation and ethics review and feed any information into the development of the PAS and the ISO standards. And also the creation of a series of test beds where we can have live sites operating these machines in different environments for different aspects. So we could have an excavator on one site, compactor on another site, and other machines on other sites, as well as the development center that we've got in Morton in the Marsh. We are looking to try and utilize that as well. And hopefully you can understand that this is building to a bigger picture, which is where we see potentially one site with fully autonomous vehicles operating, but we need to understand how they operate on an individual basis in the interim. So that's where we're heading to, and that's what we're looking at achieving in the next phase. I will say one thing. I know it's CAP, it's connected and autonomous plant. Realistically speaking, we have focused quite largely on the autonomous aspect of it, understandably so. So we are going to be looking to understand what the connectivity, the big C, means in terms of these efforts going forward. And it's good to see that Tommy and Jenny are on the call from Plinks, because they form part of that picture as well. Next slide, please. So we thank you for your concentration and your participation in this presentation today. We are happy to take questions, and that's where our presentation concludes. Next slide, please. If you do have any questions, we do welcome them at our inbox, which is presented on the next slide.
Guys, thanks for that. That was really appreciated. A good in-depth overview as to what's going on. Lots of information and really well timed as well. Perfectly. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions and answers. So that's really excellent. If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Although maybe if there's time as well, we can just take them verbal questions as well. While you're thinking of those questions, maybe I could just lead with a question or two, guys, if that's okay. Just a couple of slides earlier, you talked about potential certification of the levels, and yeah, fully understand the reasoning behind that. Did you have at this early stage any ideas, any thoughts about whether that certification process would be able to be formed by the manufacturers of the equipment themselves, so sort of self-certification against standards, or did you see that maybe as requiring some sort of independent third-party assessment of the autonomy level?
If we're talking from a personal perspective, I would go with the latter, purely because I'm not too sure how much confidence it will build within industry if people can kind of certify themselves or mark their own homework. We do need to have an impartial party taking on board these kind of certification schemes, just to build trust amongst industry that we are working to a certain standard, as well as building trust within National Highways that we're working to a certain standard. So on a personal perspective, from my own views, is that we'll go with the latter, an independent third party. But that's not to say that National Highways might think otherwise. Sure. Muneer, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll give you my views. I think this is a really good thing about our innovation team is that we have different perspectives and we discuss lots of things and we go forward. My view potentially is that in the initial stages, it's very much building a trusting partnership. When we develop the standards, when we develop what we need to, very much so it will be given to the supply chain, because we're going to be developing, and we are developing it with the supply chain. So we're literally relying on them to tell us what we've done is correct. So when we do give it to OEM number 2 or OEM number 3, they will easily be able to interpret and adopt it and mark where they are in terms of their level of automation. So I don't think at this current stage it will be somebody going around with a pen and saying, well, what pen, I'm talking about old school now. Going forward, it should be something else by then. It would be like a pad or something on site and say, this is where you are on your journey. So I think it's going to be very much up to the supply chain to mark where they are. What we don't want to be in a position is that a supplier says we are at a very high level in automation, yet when it comes on site, they're not. I don't think it's going to be of any benefit to the supplier. But at the same time, what we have done is that we are working with an OEM now. In fact, we're working with 2 or 3 big OEMs who have already tested where they are against the criteria. And the system does work. So it's all about self-certification, marking it yourself and saying this is where you are. And very similarly, if it's not up to standard or there's things that are missing, we are willing to listen and we can adopt and amend the standards. So it's very much a journey. And again, I sort of make a comparison between the SAE levels, is that when it first started, it was very much so at an early stage. If you look at it now, it's developed over a number of years. And I think we're going to start to take the same trajectory as well, in that it will start to develop as years go on. And as more OEMs sort of tell us, well, actually, you missed this, and actually, you need to consider this. So there is no right or wrong answer on this. And we are at a stage where we've launched it. It's the first of a kind globally. No one's done this. So it is breaking new ground, there's a bit of a pun there, apologies. But it's something new, no one's done it, and we are willing to listen if there's things that we've missed.
Brilliant. Super. Thanks for that, guys. Thanks for that interesting insight. I'm pleased to see there's a couple of questions popped up in the chat. You may not have access to that, judging by your means of entrance into this meeting. So let me read them out. The first one's from Igor Delift, and he asks, after thanking you for the interesting presentation, asks, are there any cooperations with initiatives in other countries, e.g. MIC4 in Germany?
Not to my knowledge. Muneer, you have to expand on that.
Okay, I'm not too familiar with that, so I'll have to give my apologies with that particular term. But what we have done is that I personally have given a lot of presentations on the international platform. I've given it to our colleagues in, I'll name some of the countries anyway. I don't like naming, but I've given a presentation to our Norwegian colleagues. I've given it to our German colleagues who run some of the strategic road network. I've given it to colleagues further afield. I did have some meetings with some colleagues in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So we are discussing it on the international platform, yes, but the particular reference that you make, I'm not cited on that. So I can't fully, hopefully I've answered partly of that, most of your question.
All right, thank you. And actually, I might be able to add something onto that in one specific area of the topics you discovered, which is again on the autonomy levels. Ross Walker, who is on this call this afternoon, and myself represent BSI at an ISO forum, International Standards Forum, that is developing a global standard for autonomy levels of earth-moving machinery. This was initiated during last year, and kick-off meetings have taken place over the last 2 or 3 months, where it's still at a relatively early stage. We're at the process of really just forming definitions at the moment. We haven't actually got as far as forming any autonomy levels, but yeah, just to let you know that there is work at an international level, and because of Ross's background in this CAP project, we're ensuring that the learnings from this project are carried forward into that standard. So one, to speed and ease its development, but also we would hate to see any conflicting requirements across the two. So we're working, Ross and I, to ensure there's good alignment and good speed in developing that ISO.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just add on to that. I mean, it's something that we're always mindful of, that we don't duplicate anything, and we build on those collaborations. And we've got Ross, who's on our team. It sounds like his input into it, but it's just a term. I may have not come across the term, and if it's relatively new, I'm sure I've got something in my calendar that's going to invite us to it, if not already in there. But I'm sure Ross will sit on it on our behalf.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So moving on to the next question, which has been submitted by Tommy Williams. And it asks, are you considering data sharing / ownership as part of the CAP standard? So the good old question about data and ownership.
Should I do that one, Amir?
If you can, yes, and I'll add to the end if possible.
Okay. I think data sharing is always a challenging area. And it's a case of how much data do we need as a client. We can have too much data or too little data, and it's getting the fine balance that meets our needs. Now, there's a lot of standards out there that allow us to have access to it. But what we are doing is working with the supply chain to really understand the data that we need in order for us to make intelligent decisions. So we do hopefully want to have most of the data that's applicable to us. And this will include items such as having the as-built drawing as has been built on site, not the as-built that's been done by the design houses, and also having other data which works and talks about fuel consumption, idle time, number of passes. That information is already obtained by supply chain, but at some stage, I think we should have that information as a client so we can start building a richer picture and better picture of what's really happening. Anything else you want to add on to that?
I was wondering if we could potentially bring Ross Walker into the conversation. Ross, are you able to share any more information as to the ISO work in terms of sharing data?
Ross is on the phone. I think something's pinged though. Mic's not working. So, yeah. Was there another question?
Just asked him to unmute, but I don't know. He's obviously not paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that. I think just judging by the time, I think we may be only a couple of minutes left, and there's one last question that's come in from Jenny Road, and it asks: are you anticipating changes in training needs and alerts for workers regarding their plant interactions as the plant capability levels increase? Because obviously, I guess this is going to be a new area of skills and training that might be required.
It is one of the items that's been identified by us, and I think there will be a training gap that needs to be filled because as technology progresses, whether it's semi-automation, whether the operative is supporting or doing some of the activity and letting the plant take some of the task on. That all needs to be done. I think there's a bigger piece there around the behavioral element as well. In that, although there's a training piece, we really need to get the behavior to be looked at as well. Of course, we've got so many skilled operators out there who can do a job absolutely brilliantly, but we just need them to sort of help us develop and sort of get them up to speed with the new tech that's coming out there. So I do think there's a training element that needs to be done. What that exactly entails at the moment is sort of being developed. But yes, I think it is something that we will end up have to do in the future.
Just to build on that as well, please can I ask you to go to slide 11 of the presentation for the roadmap?
Stop me when I get there.
Okay.
There aren't any numbers on them.
It will be the roadmap.
The roadmap, yeah.
Just one more before. One more.
There, that one there. So just to build on what Muneer said, it does actually form one of our key kind of streams of work amongst the people in society theme. So we've got CAP training frameworks that we've identified that we do need to realise, as there will be a change in the way that we work. So in answer to the question, we do anticipate that there will be training required, and we're going to be developing a framework around that.
And I think even going further afield, and this is looking like in the long term, I think some of our operators potentially will start to work on a remote site. It could be working from a dedicated office and operating a machine further afield. So those kind of training need to be met. And I think from my own perspective, it really opens up the opportunity for a more diverse workforce, potentially having more people who have disabilities or limit them from going on site. We can get them to come into a safe environment, operate a plant which is thousands of miles away, and really start getting, I suppose, more females and getting more diverse workforce onto site, and start challenging them and saying, well, you know, it's something new, it's up and coming. And then the way the new generation is going, and I refer to my own kids, a lot of them are very tech savvy, and they like the technology. And I think if we're going to get the new generation in, it's the technology which they're going to be attracted to. So there's a number of elements that we need to consider. It's the up and coming engineers, and that's why we've gone through presenting lots of papers at international conferences. We're doing a lot of visits. I've got one in a couple of weeks at a school where we're doing I'm going to take some of the VR kits, try to get them to come into engineering. And very similarly, the more experienced people, get them and retrain them up and say, this is where we're going to be in the future. How can you help us develop this? Hope that answers the question.
Super. Really appreciate that, guys. I know we're now right at the top of the hour. So with that, I'm going to draw that to a close. On behalf of CEA, really appreciate Muneer and Amr for their excellent presentation. Their enthusiasm is obvious to feel. So I'm wrapping it up there. And Joanna, I'll pass it back to you to close out. And by the way, there's a question about the sharing of the presentation as well, Joanna.
Yeah, thanks, Dale, and thanks again, Amr and Muneer. Excellent presentations as always. Yes, the slides and the recording of the webinar will be available on the CEA website once we've downloaded it, and also we will send the individual slide pack to anybody who's registered today, so you should be receiving those soon, or at least the link to where to find them. Just very quickly, I mentioned PlantWorks at the start of the webinar. Sales will be opening very soon on PlantWorks. Those of you who are not familiar with it, it's the UK's only construction equipment show that you can come along and actually operate the equipment yourself and try before you buy, providing you've got the right operating licenses. It will be held again at Peterborough next year, 13th to the 15th of June, and you should all be receiving some information in the next few weeks. So thank you very much for everybody attending, and we'll send details of the next Power Hour as soon as we have them. We're hoping to have a speaker on the effects of Russian sanctions and also the war in Ukraine. Just trying to pin a date down. Obviously, it's Hillhead later on in June, so we're trying to look for something earlier rather than later, or it might just get pushed into the beginning of July. So thanks very much and enjoy the rest of Wednesday. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.